You ever go to the grocery store because you're getting ready to cook this delicious dish and you just need a little piece of ginger? And you think to yourself, man, ginger's so expensive. You don't get much and you have to shave off the edges and it's not much there. Well, you can grow your own. It's really simple. You can grow it from the grocery store ginger too. It's really, really easy. I'm going to show you a way to do it, and it's not going to leave you with a stomachache. All right, let's go. Oh man. Oh, I love ginger. Ginger is really an amazing little plant. In fact, it can be used so many different ways. I mean, the leaves smell great. It's got a beautiful fine texture and can be used in a landscape plant, and it's also edible, which is great. Now, let's talk a little bit about ginger, especially if you want to grow your own. Ginger is not a root. They call it ginger root. It's a rhizome, kind of like the bananas. But ginger root is what you find in the store. It's the same thing you plant in the ground. Now, ginger generally grows in the tropics. It needs a pretty good amount of humidity. Also, it likes heat, and it really likes really fertile soil. It likes to keep its feet wet. And you can grow it anywhere though, but zones 8 and up really are best. You can grow it in zone 7 on down, but you have to do a little bit different things. We'll talk about that in just a second. Now, what's amazing about ginger, it has great properties. First of all, it's tasty. It's used in a lot of Asian cuisine, and just for different flavorings, if you want to kind of zest up a dish a little bit. It's also great for the stomach. In fact, I believe ginger ale was created for that reason. Ginger beer was made to soothe a sore stomach. You can eat the root raw. You do have to peel the outside. You can also dry it by slicing it into thin sheets and throwing it on the dryer, and then you can grind it up and use it like a powder, just like you would find in the grocery store. You can also use these leaves. These leaves have the same types of chemical makeup and all the things that go into ginger that are so good for you in the leaves as well. They're just not as potent. In fact, they can be used fresh in Asian cuisine. I've used them in stir fry. They're really tasty. You do want to kind of chop them up a little bit though. They're a little bit fibery. You can also dry these and make a great tea, which is really great to have around if people have stomach aches or stomach issues in the house. You can dry a whole bunch of this and put it in a jar and just steep it and make a tea. And we're actually going to use all parts of this plant today. So first of all, we're going to talk about what to look for in the store. We're going to talk about how to get that ready, how to plant it, how to grow it, and then how to harvest it. All right, let's get our hands dirty. Dumpling. Okay, anyway. So the first step to growing ginger on your own, especially from store-bought material, is to pick your ginger. This is a ginger rhizome. As you can see, it's plump, it's quite firm, doesn't have any soft spots in it, and it's not shriveled and dried up. Now that's important. You don't have to get organic. I will say that sometimes... Dump, I'll get you some when we're done, buddy. Chicken. Anyway, you don't have to get organic. It probably is a little bit better, might be a little bit easier, but I've never used the organic before and it works just fine. Now what you want to look for again is you want to look for something that's firm. You also want to look for little eyes, and that's just like a potato. So you can see where it's going to grow, where it's going to produce its growth from. I do recommend getting a big piece because it gives you more opportunities for success. Now if you look here closely, these are what we're looking for, these little bumps. Now these bumps are what will produce the eyes that come out of this and form the actual growing plant. Now, not all of them are going to produce. You don't want to look. You want to look for stuff that doesn't have any damage to it. Like for instance, this part here, you can see it. It's really dried out. That's probably not going to produce one. But that's the most important part. It's got to be firm. It doesn't need to be mushy. It doesn't need to be shriveled and dried up. And you're looking for a few eyes. The more, the better. So once you get this, bring it home. It's really, really easy. Set it on your kitchen counter. Let it sit for 3, 4, 5 weeks. And don't put any water in it or any of that stuff. Make sure it's just in a normal spot. It gets light and all that good stuff. And if you want to speed it up, you can maybe throw an onion or a piece of garlic in there and just let it sit in the paper. Of course, you don't need to shave it. So anyway, that's what you do. Then you wait, and you end up with something like this. Things have grown considerably. Those are those little eyes. You can see how it's grown out and up. This is what will produce the actual leaves. There's one here. Now you notice there's a bunch of spots on this. There's here, 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 and here. Not all of them produced, although one of these I just saw, this one is starting to produce, but it's very shriveled now, so it's probably not gonna go a whole lot further. So once you get to this point, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna cut a piece off of it and show you how this works. All I'm gonna do is take this, clean knife, and I'm actually gonna do this over here so I don't cut myself. And I'll just take and I'll cut off a piece of this. Now, I'm gonna cut several pieces. That actually is kind of a big piece, but it's okay. It's not gonna hurt anything. There's one more there. We'll take that. We'll actually just cut this whole piece off here. And we will take that. And we'll even see if maybe this may grow as well. Okay, so now we've got our ginger cut up into pieces. You can see the little growth area right there. And each piece has something. If you have a part that's not, you can just get rid of it, but I suggest just planting it anyway, because you never know what's gonna grow. So, now, we gotta plant it, right? This is just compost. I actually don't need a container this deep. As you can see, it's a full-size pot here. Ginger really only grows about that depth. Dump, I'm hurrying. They want seed. It only grows about this depth, so you don't need a pot this deep, but it is important to note that when you plant this, don't plant it next to the side, get it right in the middle. And if you're gonna put it in pots, start in a smaller pot than you plan to grow it in. And we should talk about that too. And we'll get to that after we plant this. But the reason is because it spreads out, usually in one direction, sometimes two, but almost always in a line. So if you plant it next to the edge, it's gonna grow right to the edge, you're gonna have a problem. So anyway, let's plant this in the soil. We're gonna start by taking our soil here, and we're just gonna make a little bit of a trench, okay? Now, I plan to actually repot this later. It's okay that this hasn't healed off yet, by the way, and I'll explain that in a minute when we harvest. But all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push this into the soil. That's it, not very deep. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and put these other pieces in here too. And the reason is because I'm going to split this off later. Now let's talk about that. If you're in a climate that is not ideal for growing ginger, then it's very important that you pot it because you'll want to bring it in. Now if you look, I'm not covering up these new growth stems. Okay, there's just a little bit of cover on top. This is pre-moistened soil and we're gonna water it in. When you bring these plants in for the winter, you want to protect them from the cold. They will freeze back. In zones 8 through 10, they'll freeze back and be fine. You just want to make sure they don't get waterlogged. But in other zones, you want to plant it in a pot. You want to start here. Once you get some good green growth, usually about 6 to 12 inches, you want to make sure that you pot it up. And the reason being is because it needs room to spread out. It's more of a horizontal growth than a deep vertical growth. And obviously, the growth is below ground. So, again, zones 8 and 10, or 8 through 10, it's really easy. You can stick this in the ground at just about any time. Right now it's actually early winter for me, or actually winter for me, but very early on. I can stick it in the ground now and let it grow. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna start it in pots because that's the way I've done it before. If you're in a more northern climate, so something lower than zone 8, if you're going to put it in the ground, or even if you have it in the house, because the house tends to be cooler, make sure you tent it with something plastic. You can take a clear plastic milk jug or a juice jug, cut the top off, and stick it over the pot. You just want to keep that humidity in there. You also want to keep it a little bit warm. Once you see that growth start to come up, you've got to make sure that you pull it off so it has room to grow. Don't let it get too cold. It's okay in the house, and it definitely needs to get some sunlight. Even your ambient lights above will grow it. It won't grow it great, but once you get to the springtime, you can always move it into a much bigger pot, and I would suggest something in the 12 to 14 inch range at the top. You can plant it into there, or multiple pots, and stick it outside. It'll do great. All right, so let's talk about how we feed and take care of ginger. So this is the ginger plant now. It's early December, mid-December, and I planted this in my garden in March. Now we've had an unseasonably warm December. In fact, it's the warmest December we've had in Texas ever in recorded history. So this really shouldn't be here by now. Some of it's turning a little bit brown, and that's what you'll see when it gets too cold. It'll start to brown out. Now, let's talk about how we took care of this the whole time. Like I said before, there's a couple things it needs. It needs humidity, which is not a deal breaker. If the humidity is not super high, it's okay, but it does need water. It needs to stay damp, not wet, not soaked, but damp, and it needs good organic material. So I would suggest what I did is I planted directly into my regular garden soil. I topped it with compost, and then I've watered it several times using a liquid fertilizer. Fish emulsions, what I use mostly. I also use tomato and veg from Neptune's Harvest, not sponsored. And I've also used some of my own homemade stuff that we'll talk about in other videos. But it works well. This is a really easy plant. You don't have to worry about it too much. There's not a whole lot of bugs that mess with it or anything else. My worst part's been dealing with armadillos trying to dig it up. Hopefully you don't have that issue, but that's all you have to do to take care of it. So now that we know how to take care of our ginger, we've already planted it, we've grown it into the year, we've put it in the ground, and this has tripled in size. This was 2 small plants, by the way, so 2 of those that we just planted a minute ago, that's what these were when I planted them in the spring. They were about that tall. To harvest these things, you can really just pull them up. But if they're not in your garden or they're in a little bit stickier place, it might be a little harder to do. But let's get in here close and I'll show you what this stuff looks like on the ground. So down here at the base, I'll just pull these leaves out real quick. You can see where the shoots have come up. Now somewhere in about the middle of this plant, right here, so in here, all of this is new growth off the single shoot. Now this one's actually started to spread out, but if I dig down, look at that. You can see, there's the ginger, okay? So that's what we want to get to. Okay, now that it's time to pull this stuff up and you've seen where the root is, there's 2 things we need to harvest this. You can take a shovel, gently push it into the soil and lift to loosen your soil, and that can help release it. Now, once it's loosened, you're gonna need these. Now, remember I told you that these leaves can be used to make tea on their own. So we're gonna save those. Now I'm gonna go to this first plant and I'm just gonna trim them out. So we just wanna come in here and grab these up in a bunch, and we're gonna snip it about a foot off the ground. Okay, so we've done this single plant over here. You can see most of it's gone. I'll trim this off again here in a minute too, but right now I want to get to pulling this ginger up. I want to show you what it looks like, how it comes out of the ground, and what we do with it after that. I'm going to probably leave this one in the ground to see how it does over this winter, but I am going to cut these leaves off. So let's take a look at this and see what it looks like. I'm going to grab it by the stalks. I'm just going to lift. So we've got quite a bit out of this. You set this piece up here and this piece that fell off. Now you can see there's ginger all through this, big pieces, chunks. It's got a lot of dirt in it, but that's okay. We're just gonna rinse this off. We're gonna cut the knobs off and we're done. You don't have to harvest this in one big batch like this. You can actually harvest just a piece, and I'll show you that now. So we don't have to harvest the whole thing, like I said, we can just harvest a piece. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna dig down here into the ground to pull this out and harvest this piece. We're just gonna grab it firmly at the base and we're gonna twist. And what we get is a nice big piece of ginger. Now don't worry too much about hurting these plants. All I really wanna do is cover the hole back up. And like I said, I'm gonna trim this down in just a minute too, but as you can see, we got a big piece of ginger. The rhizome left in the ground will be just fine, and it'll heal up. It's basically a root, and so it doesn't really need to heal up like a potato does. It'll be fine, just don't overwater it. So this is gonna be some tasty ginger. All right guys, I just wanted to show you this beautiful piece of ginger. I've washed it all up. I probably got about 3 to 4 pounds of ginger out of that. It's super fresh, smells super good, so worth doing, it's so easy to do. And I also got these, which I'm gonna dry these, leaves and stems. The stems chopped up really small, and I'm gonna use them for tea from now until probably this time next year. So I want to recap really quickly everything we did. First of all, make sure that you pick the right ginger. It doesn't have to be organic, it doesn't have to be anything special. You just have to make sure that it's firm, not wilted, and it has a few eyes popping off the sides. If they're green, all the better. If they're not green, okay. But you need to make sure that you look for that. It looks kind of like a potato eye. Next, when you get back, you need to make sure you put that in a warm place, like your house. You can put it on the kitchen counter, make sure there's light, doesn't matter, it's fine. Leave it there for at least 2 to 3 weeks until you see the eyes pop up and swell like we showed you before, and the shoots start to come out. Now, if you want to speed this up, put a whole onion in there beside it, or a couple pieces of garlic cloves with the paper on it. It'll help speed it up a little bit. Next, when it's time to plant, we're going to cut off sections of the ginger to make sure that each one has a new stalk, an eye that's grown, and we're going to plant all we can. Now, You remember, it doesn't have to be healed like you do a potato. You just put it in there, cover up the root or the rhizome, but not the new stem, okay? Give it water. If you live in an area like mine, the zones 8 through 10, you could plant it outside, even in the winter, but you might put a plastic kind of greenhouse type cap over it to keep the humidity and warmth up as it gets to growing. If you live zone 7 and lower, then you definitely want to bring it inside and put some kind of plastic bag over it to keep the humidity in and keep it growing. Once the shoots get to about a foot or so, or they start to touch the top of your container, pull it off and you're ready to go. Keep it watered but not wet, and make sure to give it a little bit of fertilizer. Now, how do we take care of it long term? Same thing. When you pop it in the ground or you pot it up, you want to make sure that you add some compost, some good organic material to the top, water it in, keep it wet, or keep it moist, not wet. If you put it in the ground, same thing. It's going to grow on its own. It's not hard. When it comes time to harvest, all we're going to do is we're going to cut the tops off. We're going to loosen the plant either by using a shovel to loosen the root at the bottom, or we can use our hands to rock back and forth, pull it out, break them apart, wash them up, cut the stems, we're ready to go. But that's it. It's really simple. I think you're going to have success with it. Now, guys, if you've gotten this far and you like this video, make sure and give it a thumbs up. And more importantly, leave a comment below. It really helps my channel grow, and it helps the videos get more traction on YouTube. Now, if you know somebody that wants to grow ginger or loves things like this, or maybe has had a method of growing ginger that works and they want to see another one, share the video with them and tell them to comment down below too. I love your comments, guys, because I learn things I don't know already. This is an experiment for me too, okay? I've done this a lot, but I'm always learning. So I've tried out some of the crazy things that people have put in there. Some of them work, some of them don't, but I appreciate all of them, and I try to talk to each and every one of you. So make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, I want to leave you like I always leave you. There's only 4 things you need to have a happy and well-balanced life. Number 1, you need to have something to believe in. Number 2, you need to have somebody to love. Number 3, you need to have something to do. And number 4, you need to have something to look forward to. I look forward to hanging out with you guys, cooking in the kitchen, being in the garden. I love you all, and I cannot wait to see you in the next video. All right, Doc out. Dump. Jeez. It's like they know. All right. Ginger generally glow. Ginger generally. Ooh, I can't say that. Well, I'm going to tell you that it's really easy to dump. That chicken. He took Nugget's place.